Hi, I'm Sam from the University of College Cork, and I'm going to be talking to you about the seal tracking work that me and Mark have been doing as part of the Seamonitor project to monitor diving and space use by rehabilitated harbour seals across the Irish Sea. So a bit of background on the subject. Seal rehabilitation programmes are widely used for the temporary care of individuals that have required rescue. These animals are typically those abandoned by the mother prior to weaning, often as a result of human disturbance. So this might be a large number of individuals congregating on the beach and disturbing some seals that are hauled out, or it could be a dog attack. The goal of rehabilitation programs is to release animals back into the wild that will survive, display appropriate behaviours, and eventually successfully reproduce. However, despite the common existence of these programs, relatively little is known about the post-release survival, behaviour and movement of rehabilitated seals. So within the framework of Seamonitor, biotelemetry devices will be used to track the behaviours and movements of rehabilitated juvenile harbour seals from Explorers Seal Sanctuary in Portaferry, Northern Ireland. And the data obtained will be used to assess diving capabilities and development alongside survival, movement patterns and spatial distribution, as well as producing a spatial distribution model, and interactions with anthropogenic activities and risk exposure. So for example, to fisheries or marine renewable energy installations. So the tracking devices we're using in this project are GPS-GSM devices or phone tags. And these were sourced from the Sea Mammal Research Unit in St Andrews. The devices are comprised of fast-lock GPS, which attempts to record a location every 15 minutes, a wet-dry sensor, a time depth recorder, and a CTD, but for this study was only logging temperature and not conductivity. Measurements from the device are then summarized on board, and when the seal comes within range of the mobile phone network, are remotely transmitted. And this is really nice because it provides us information on seal behavior and movement in near real time. So the aim of our device deployment is to get these GPS-GSM devices on 15 individuals released from the Explorers Seal Sanctuary in Portaferry, which I've highlighted in the map on the right for those of you who are not familiar where Explorers is or Portaferry. As of the 4th of November in 2020, 9 devices have been deployed across 10 seals. So we had one device which we retrieved off a seal that was finishing its deployment period, and this device we then redeployed on another seal. We've got another 3 seals that are likely ready for release within the next month, and the last 3 will be released early next year. So we should have all of our devices deployed by spring next year, which is really good. So this is an overview of the releases we've done so far and the tracking periods that we've obtained. So we started doing the seal releases in November 2019 when we released 2 seals, Merida and Ariel, who we got 3 to 4 months of data from. We then released another 3 seals at the beginning of February in 2020. And these seals we had quite long tracking periods from. We then had a tag that we'd retrieved off Ariel, we redeployed on Baloo in August. So Baloo was kind of a special seal. He was in the rehabilitation center for a very long time. He was also much heavier than the other seals when he was released, and he took a long time to learn how to feed. So we were quite happy to redeploy an older tag on him because we weren't sure what his behavior would be like. And finally, we put out 2 tags a couple of weeks ago and another 2 earlier this week. So we have 4 currently out on Pierre, Diggory, Mills and Hope, and those are currently transmitting data which we're getting in every day at the moment. So I thought I'd just go through some of the data that we received from those 5 seals that we tracked from November last year and February earlier this year. So these maps show the GPS tracks of the entire deployment period for each of those seals. And the colouring is related to the speed that they're going up. So dark red is where they've been moving very slowly, so they're likely foraging. and using those areas more intensely, and whiter is where they're traveling fast, so they're likely just passing through. And it's quite nice, this data, because it was unexpected, but we ended up finding out that the first 2 seals we released did these huge trips over to Scotland, Northern England, and Wales, which hasn't really been expected before. So that was really interesting. And then in contrast to that, in February, the 3 seals we released then did kind of completely the opposite and all stayed along the coast and were very consistent in their behavior. So this was something quite interesting already in itself. The tags also gave us information on periods when they were dry. So this can either be because the seal is holed out on land or it's floating in the water with its head above. And this will typically just be the seal resting. And this gives us information on areas where seals might be more vulnerable to disturbance because it's where they rest. We also got dive profiles from the tags. So for each dive, we get 25 depths at equal proportions along the dive. And from this, we can reconstruct the shape of the dive. So this is just 6 examples that I've pulled out, but it's quite nice because you can see that some of the dives, they go straight down and then they kind of forage along the bottom or at the same depth of the water column, whilst in others, they might spend a long time going down, but then only spend a small amount of time at the bottom and then come back up. So you can get quite a bit of information from these. And from this, we can start to look at, okay, so what is their diving ability like and how is their behavior evolving through time? What are they doing relative to when they were released? So these 2 plots, the one on the left shows the maximum daily dive depth and the one on the right, the dive durations. And so we can just see that from a very soon after they're released, within the first few weeks, these animals are already diving to depths greater than 40 meters. They can already make dives that are lasting longer than 5 minutes. And so this just shows us that these animals, they are able to forage, and that when they're released, they do seem to be able to be independent. So that's good news for the rehabilitation programs. We can plot these spatially as well. So we can put our maximum, this is a map of maximum dive depth at each GPS point. And this is quite nice because we can identify not only the geographical areas where they spend more time, but within those areas, what are the important depths that they're using in the water column. And then we also get temperature data from the tags. So I know that there's oceanographers as part of this project in Compass, and I thought this might be interesting to those guys. So I've just pulled out a few of the casts that are constructed from the dives to give an example of what the data looks like. And these are just some that show some stratification in the water column. So we have the examples I've pulled out are to about 25 meters, but we have some profiles that go down to 150 meters, 100 meters, just as deep as the seals dive, basically. And we can plot these data spatially as well. So here, for each one of those reconstructed oceanographic profiles, I've taken the near surface temperature and plotted that. And so we can get an idea of what the surface temperature is in the places where seals are visiting. It's worth noticing here that some of the warmer temperatures won't be just driven spatially, but also temporally, because some of these seals were tracked from February to June, when you'd expect surface waters to be heating up. But it's quite nice because it gives us an idea of the water structure. And we can also look at the vertical water structure. So here I've taken the difference in temperature between the measurement at 2 meters and the deepest depth the seal went to. So in some instances, this will only be at 30 meters, and in others, this might be down to 80 or 100. But it's just to give an idea of, can we detect stratification, and what can we learn about the water column. And it's quite nice because we see, especially from Esmeralda and Derby, who were tracked well into May, when we'd expect the waters to start stratifying in this region, that we are able to detect that on the tags. And I think that's really nice in situ data that we have that maybe isn't available for these areas elsewhere. So that's the data we have so far. We also have ongoing data transmissions. And so in collaboration with the Marine Institute, and particularly I've been working with Rob Thomas there, we've been getting this data up onto the ERDAP portal. so that it can be accessed and plotted at a 1 week lag. And so you can find that at the address, and you just need to search for the Harbour Seal Seamonitor project. And it's quite nice because you can select out a seal and then you can put their whole track up, you can select parts of it, you can zoom in and out. And for 2 of the seals that we released on the 16th of October, we've got a couple of maps generated that each time you refresh them will be updated. And yeah, these are quite nice because, as you can see, we already can see where they're going. Mills is doing what those seals in February did, kind of staying to the coast and going south towards Dundalk, whereas Diggory seems to have gone on an offshore adventure. So that's interesting. We'll see how that develops. And yeah, so our future work. So we, as I said before, we've got another 6 GPS-GSM devices to go out over the next 4 to 6 months, but I expect 3 of these to be out before the end of the year. So we should have all the data coming in within the next 6 months. And following this, or continuing on to what we're working on now, is just processing and analysing this data following the research objectives that I mentioned earlier. So we've been investigating dive and forage behaviour and possible links to survival. So here I've just taken that graph I showed you before of the maximum daily dive durations. So this is on the left. And I've also plotted out the scaled surface intervals on the right. So this is how long the animal rests at the surface or stays at the surface before making another dive. So it's a kind of an indicator of the recovery time from the dive, because these animals have to essentially hold their breath while they dive. And so it's quite interesting because Merida, who's in blue, was one of the seals we tracked last November, but we only got about a month of data. And then she disappeared off the radar, which could either be the tag failed, it dropped off, which they do when the animal molts, or that she suffered a mortality. But we don't really know unless we have another indicator. And here it looks like she started to not do very well in her diving. So she started making very short dives and her recovery time started to increase quite a lot. So there's potentially something happened there that meant she just wasn't doing very well. So that's something we'll investigate further. We've started looking at our spatial distributions. So on the right here is just some simple kernel densities of the data we have so far, but this has to be taken with a pinch of salt because it's only 5 individuals. But so far what we have is kind of 2 dispersal strategies. We have 2 seals that do these huge trips across the Irish and Celtic seas and up into the Inner Hebrides even. And then we have another 3 that seem to just stay very close to the coast of Ireland and are very consistent in their behavior. So it's interesting that, that we have these 2 different strategies already coming out. And yeah, this data will feed into a spatial distribution model. And finally, we want to investigate those interactions of anthropogenic activities. So we want to get information on fishery activity in the area and have a look at where the animals are interacting with fishing boats potentially. But we also want to have a look at wind farms. So we noticed that one of the first seals that we tracked, Ariel, who did the huge trip up to England, Scotland and Wales, actually visited a load of wind farms. So the tracks of all the seals are on the right, and on the left in red are the locations of wind farms. And if you look specifically at Ariel, we saw that she visited multiple wind farm sites and took up residency for an extended period of time, more than 10 weeks at one site. So each plot here is 4 days worth of data. And so the first site she visited was the Robin Rig Wind Farm at the Solway Firth. She first went there, spent a week or so there, then went up to the Inner Hebrides and came back down, spent another few days before then heading back further down the coast towards Wales. And here she ended up at the Gwynter Morth Wind Farm of North Wales. And she resided here for more than 10 weeks until she was picked up by the RSPCA. And that's when we got the tag retrieved. And she ended up being euthanized because of a lungworm infection, unfortunately. But prior to this, she'd been making very regular trips to and from the wind farm and foraging within the area of the wind farm, then coming to haul out on land and going back. And so we're interested to try and investigate a bit more what she was doing exactly in the wind farm and what was driving this behavior. So that's another really nice data aspect we're getting from this study. So yeah, that's where we're at now. And I think we're going to have some nice stuff coming out in the next year. I just want to say thanks to the EU for the INTERREG VA program funding. and everybody involved in the project. And yeah, I'm happy to answer and discuss any questions you have during the webinar series later in November. Thank you very much.